And good evening. Welcome once again to Edge of Reality TV. And I am Willie Hassel, and this, of course, is the lovely Lynn Nickerson.
Thank you so much, Willie, for that lovely introduction.
Oh, how are you doing?
I'm doing just grand. Yourself?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah, you look about the same.
Like
yeah.
the same? I haven't changed since last month?
No, since last month, no.
Hair got a little bit longer, didn't it? A little bit less.
But you didn't
too.
get any older, Willie.
No, I know I didn't get any older.
Neither of us did.
No.
Yeah.
No. Actually, I got younger. I'm 48 now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm not 49 anymore. I'm 48. So, do you believe that? Anybody out there believe that?
Sure.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey.
Man of integrity. But please proceed.
Proceed, yes, actually.
We have a guest tonight.
We have a wonderful guest tonight. And he came a long way just to be with us here tonight.
He did. I bet his arms are tired from
I
flapping.
bet they really are. That's a big pond that he had to come across. So Dylan Jones is undertaking his PhD at Robert Gordon University, exploring media influences and professional practices of modern paranormal groups. He is a retired police officer and has a wealth of experience investigating spontaneous cases for over 30 years. He has a degree in media production and extensive experience working in many radio formats, including community, commercial, and BBC radio. As a member of the Society for Psychical Research, the Parapsychological Association, and Parascience, his interests focus on the influence of the media portrayal of paranormal, developing educational media content related to spontaneous phenomena, as well as the importance of witness testimony in gathering evidence.
Important.
He is the creator of the Great British Ghost Tour, the Great American Ghost Tour, and the Ghost Hunter websites, and a regular contributor to Ghost Chronicles International radio show. He has presented at various events in both the UK and the USA. In 2019, he filmed a documentary especially for and presented to two talks at the 35th anniversary of Ghostbusters at the Sony Studios in Los Angeles. As a result, he was invited to attend the world premiere of Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021.
Had to be fun.
And after that short bio, I think we still have time for a little bit of
We can still quiz him? Okay, good.
All right. Welcome, Dylan Jones.
Thank you very much, both of you, for inviting me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's a veritable parapsychologist.
It is. Right in our midst, we have a parapsychologist.
That's right. So we're so glad you could make it.
It's a real privilege and an honor to be invited on. Thank you very much.
Well, I've got so many different questions. Did you do all the websites yourself? You've got like 5 of them.
Yes, I did my degree
in media.
Yeah, I did my degree in media production. And one of the things I really enjoy doing, as a bit of a hobby really, is to do all the graphics and design.
I love that too. Yeah, thank you. It's fun.
Yeah, I love doing it. I get a lot of pleasure out of doing it.
And how do you pronounce that? Kudiz?
Kudiz, yeah, that's the name of my media company.
Kudiz, C-O-U-K. Yeah. Okay, yeah, you did a really good job. It's really cute stuff on there.
Oh, thank you.
So, the Ghost Hunter, C-O-U-K, and the Great American Ghost Tour and the Great British Ghost Tour websites, are they kind of like, are they part of your PhD pursuit? And first of all, they're a really great repository of haunted locations and haunted stories and tales and whatnot. But did you develop those as a product of your pursuit for your PhD?
Actually, no.
No?
They started as a passion project.
Oh.
The Great British Ghost Tour started back in 2010, and that actually was because of a lifelong interest in collecting ghost stories and having a real fascination with the haunted heritage of both the UK and the USA.
Yeah.
And back in 2010, I was still as a serving police officer, but I was on an extended period of sick leave because of an injury I had on duty.
Oh.
So I thought, how on earth am I going to occupy the months that I'm going to be off? So I thought, well, I've got loads of ghost books. I could do something that's creative with my time. So I started developing the Great British Ghost Tour website and typing it all up and designing all the graphics, and it just built from there. And then it was about 2016, 17, I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a sister site to the Great British Ghost Tour? And because I love American ghosts and hauntings, let's do a similar one for that. And that's how it came about. I've got a fascination of ghost stories.
Well, it certainly is time consuming to put that together, but I went on both of the sites and I could stay there all day. There's so much territory to cover, all kinds of stories, and a lot of places that I've been to too. I just think they're
It's always
fascinating.
cool to see the places you've been, right? You know?
Yeah, it is. I haven't always experienced ghosts where I was. The Monte Vista Hotel in Flagstaff, I didn't know that there had been so many movies filmed there and so many actors had stayed there. And the night that I stayed there, there was a band, and I was traveling with the U-Haul trailer, and I couldn't sleep. So had I been able to sleep, I might have, had a ghostly encounter. But it was neat seeing it there on the list. So yeah, I just think that's a wonderful idea. Okay, so let's get into your PhD. I wanted to ask you a little more about that. What, in deciding to pursue this particular PhD, what was your statement of purpose for the thesis? How did you develop that? What direction did you want to go in to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish?
That started actually a very long time ago.
Really?
Very long time. And it all stems back really to my childhood.
Really?
It goes that far back. The PhD really is a culmination of two things that happened in my formative years growing up.
Oh, please tell us.
So back when I was 7, my uncle passed away. He had cancer. We were very close family. Anyway, as you can imagine, it affected the family a great deal. And one night I woke up from my sleep and thought I saw my uncle standing in my bedroom doorway and then fading away. And I can remember calling to my mum to come into the room. Now, there was that experience, which, yes, it does have a psychological explanation. A psychologist might say that you were having what was called a hypnopompic experience, where you're waking from a dreamlike state. I accept that. That could be one explanation. Of course, the other explanation, which is entirely possible if you're open-minded, is that there is...
Could have been a visitation.
It could have been a visitation. I'm open to accepting the possibility of both. The second formative event of my childhood happened in 1984. And I remember it vividly because I pestered my mum for weeks and weeks and weeks to take me to the cinema to watch a certain film.
Okay.
Because I'd seen the logos everywhere on the billboards.
Oh, I know
I
what
bet
it is.
I know what that was.
I know what it is. The Exorcist?
No.
No.
Oh, come on.
Lynn, I'm shocked. Because when there's
That
something...
was 73, wasn't it?
Yeah, because when there's something strange in your neighborhood, who do you call?
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
I should have known.
So I remember going to the cinema and sat there, and when the film started and you see the poor librarian going through the library and then you get Ray Parker Jr.'s song start, everybody in the whole cinema sang along.
You're kidding.
With the theme song.
I don't know why. I was in California at that time, and the theme song was really popular.
Yeah. I mean, it was huge. It really was.
It was cute, but I couldn't understand why was it so... It was catchy.
Yeah.
And I heard more about the music than I did about the film first. The music, everybody was talking about the music.
Well, it was those two formative events. So you had the paranormal
Your
event
personal paranormal.
plus the media event.
Yeah.
And it has always been the mixture of those growing up, which has led me to the point where I was going to do my PhD on something that involved the paranormal and the media. Now, when I did my degree, and I finished that in 2016, I did a media production degree, and for my dissertation, I looked at the portrayal of scientific practice in paranormal reality television.
Okay.
So when I finished my degree, I thought I need a couple of years off. I need to sort of refocus, and
Okay, and what was that degree in?
that was in media production.
Media production, okay.
So during my degree, I'd produced a lot of media content through radio interviews and documentary filmmaking and magazines with a paranormal theme to it. From 2016 to 2018, 19, I was thinking very carefully, do I want to go on to do a PhD? Because I knew that I couldn't do it full time.
Yeah.
Because that would mean 3 years of nothing else. So I thought the only way I can do it, because I've actually got a full-time job, is to do a part-time PhD, which takes 6 years. So when I made the decision, that's what I'm going to do, that was late 2019. That's when I decided then that I was going to start. So January 2020, I started the journey of doing my PhD.
Okay, so in that line of pursuit, did it entail studying the psychological behavior of those who believe in ghosts and those who don't, and what methodologies they use to look for ghosts? Because I don't think Steve Parsons was that big a believer. I don't even know if he still is. So I would almost call someone like him an atheist or a non-believer, but yet he's got this scientific methodology that he follows to the T, and he pursues it constantly. And he's great on gathering scientific data. So does that play a part in the way you were pursuing your study as believers and non-believers? And then the psychological aspect, do they ghost hunt in accordance with their spiritual belief system? Was that part of it?
I mean, what I'm looking at, my PhD covers a number of different areas, because parapsychology itself is a multidisciplinary field. So it will involve people from the disciplines of psychology, sociology, anthropology, physics. The list goes on. You need those experts from each of those fields to come into it. So my particular PhD is exploring media effects, anthropology, because I'm looking at the cultural group of ghost hunters. How do they behave? And that involves an element of sociology, it's group behavior, group studies. Psychology, yes, it does play a part, but I'm not looking at the psychology of the individual. I'm looking at how the groups behave. So my PhD is basically looking at whether or not the media affects the way that ghost hunters behave and the way that they behave professionally. Because nowadays, a lot of ghost hunting groups will say, we are scientists, we're scientific, but they will also say, oh, we are professional ghost hunters. We're professional paranormal investigators. You look on their LinkedIn, you look on their Facebook, we are professional at what we do. What does that mean?
I know.
What
is the standard for professional?
Okay, so now we've opened up, what is a professional? Nowadays you get professional sports people, whereas sport used to be an amateur pastime. We used to have amateur ghost hunters.
Well, professional indicates that there's payment involved. That was the line.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. But you could take a group of 20 people and ask them to write down what they think professionalism is, or what being a professional is, and you will have 20 different answers.
You would.
So I'm trying to find out whether the media affects the way that ghost hunters are behaving and what they think is professional.
So far, I know you haven't finished yet, but so far, what do you think?
It is too early to tell, because I'm literally at that point where I'm gathering all the data. So I'm spending a lot of time with the ghost hunting groups, with the paranormal investigators, watching what they're doing, interviewing them about what they're doing and why they're doing it. But that means that takes a lot of time. So I'm looking at groups in the US and the UK and comparing them.
Yeah.
So I've still got another 18 months of gathering that data. And then I'm going to be looking at what the analysis is. What have I found?
And I imagine you've dealt with a lot of groups probably. Have you really noticed, like, well, this group here is pretty, call it professional, for lack of a better word.
Or
and
serious about what they're doing. Yeah.
And these guys over here are just kind of a bunch of idiots,
It's very difficult it's very difficult for me to
I didn't
actually
mention any names.
I'm not going to be saying whether a group is professional or not. I am not going to be giving a verdict on that, because that's not what the PhD is about.
All
The
right.
PhD is understanding from the group's perspective whether they think that what they're doing is
how
professional.
they deem it professional.
Yeah, it's not for me to place a judgment on it,
Right.
because I'm trying to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. It'll be for other people to decide, well, that's professional or not.
Well, what about the element, this has to do with social behavior, what about the element of ego that a lot of people strut around and they profess that they're really good at what they're doing, when it winds up being a lot about them rather than about the project or the investigation? That, I think, is a great influence, and sometimes I think it's really detrimental to the investigation, to uncovering information. So do you make allowance for that? Do you look at that as well?
I mean, that will all come into play when we're gathering the data and then looking at it, because
Okay.
you know, you do come across, you know, when you look at the paranormal groups, there is very much, very often there is a person who's created the group. There is a strong driving force, a strong character at the head, and people, you know, often gather around that person, and they then work together as a team. You see a lot of ghost hunting groups fracturing.
Fracturing?
Yes, there'll be disagreements.
Oh, they'll break down.
They'll break
Okay.
down. Some will go off and find another group.
Right.
So that there's lots of interesting social dynamics that go on within the group.
Yeah, a lot of personality conflicts, I would imagine.
And how
An
they-
ego.
yeah, and how people respond to that in a professional or unprofessional manner. But it's not for me to judge whether what the rights and
Yeah.
wrongs are.
And as we were discussing earlier, the fighting between different teams. you
Yeah.
know, oh,
It's really terrible,
I mean,
especially if it's on TV.
You know, there have been examples where I've seen, and I did mention it to Willie earlier, that when I went to the Para Expo in May, how nice it was to see 3 different groups from different geographical areas working together
to put it on.
to put it on, but also in the social element as well afterwards.
It went really pretty smoothly. There was not the ego intervention all the time.
Yeah.
That was really nice. And everybody seemed very accepting of everybody else. And they were willing pretty much to carry their own weight. You know, in what had to be done, it was evenly divided. The work was parceled out rather
Yeah,
evenly.
everybody just worked together and made it happen.
Yeah, truly.
And it's going to be even better next year.
If the ship isn't contaminated. But anyway, as far as professionalism goes, I think that it might even harken way back to their own childhoods in their upbringing, where they brought up well, respectful of others, truthful, and on and on. So I think that is directly connected to how they would handle themselves professionally.
Oh, quite definitely, and I think you touched upon it earlier as well about what their beliefs in the paranormal are. I mean, all those things do influence the way that we all behave, the way that we investigate. So taking all that into consideration is part and parcel of
Yeah.
it.
I think if you're going to go out and help somebody and investigate, I think you have to have a driving interest in the paranormal. And there are different ways of doing it, of course, because there's so many gadgets out there. And I think a lot of them just duplicate efforts. But I think it's important that if they're going to be using these little gadgets, to know how they work, and then to show the clients how they work, or the results that they're getting and why they're getting what they're getting. So I think that's part of the professionalism too that enters into it. But then again, sometimes just, you know, a couple of very basic elements like the K2 meter, camera, recorder, I think those are really great, especially if you can couple that with some kind of psychic ability or a developing psychic ability. And I think that would lend toward professionalism. It just doesn't have to be a bunch of gadgets and
Right.
the data collected
And
from the
you
gadgets.
bring up gadgets, and I think that's one thing media definitely does influence is if you watch this program and they have this new gadget, everybody has to run out the next day and buy one. They don't know what it does, but it looked pretty cool on the show, so they got to have one.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should bring that up. I did spend some time with one group in the UK, and they were using the K2 meter, which is, you know, a firm favourite of ghost hunting groups. And the investigator I was talking to, I said, "Oh, why have you chosen this piece of equipment?" And she'd seen it on one of the YouTube channels. So she decided that, oh, that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this. And she was claiming to talk to spirit through the moving lights on the EMF, on the K2 meter. So I asked her, how does the K2 meter work? And she gave me some sort of explanation, which was very vague.
Okay.
And I said, well, does the K2 meter measure amplitude or frequency? And she looked really confused. And I said, well, you're using this bit of equipment. Have you read any physics books to understand electromagnetic fields? And her response was, oh, I don't understand physics. So I just left it there. But to me, it typified that, if you're going to use something, you need to have,
basic understanding.
an understanding of the concepts behind it and know what that piece of equipment does and how to interpret what it's giving you. But there was an acceptance that there was a spirit communicating through the little box.
Yeah, acceptance because it happened on TV.
Yeah.
Probably.
And
a K2 is one of our favorites. I don't profess to be any expert on it by any means, but K2 by itself means absolutely nothing to me. If you get a K2 and an EVP at the same time, maybe, maybe you got something.
Well, I think a K2 meter is helpful as long as you
It's helpful, but
eliminated the rest of the electrical interference possibilities. Then I think it's helpful.
Well, it's helpful, but it's not proof of anything.
Well, no, it
don't
isn't. But then you may not, but other people may get certain vibes, feelings that there is something hanging around them anyway,
Well, that's what
or
I'm
they may
saying.
hear something or
That's
smell
what I'm saying,
something.
K2 along with something
along
else.
with
yeah.
something, but it's not always hard evidence.
No,
The K2 is something else, so.
I mean,
You know me, I'm skeptic.
And this is why, when we say about parapsychology being a multidisciplinary field, we've already seen from just this short conversation that there's a sociological behaviour, there's the media effects. You'd have you coming into Steve Parsons' area of expertise with looking at the scientific methodology, the use of equipment, what the equipment actually does. So it brings all these things together. So it's fascinating.
Where the media might help is that a lot of people are not exposed to the latest gadgets because there's stuff coming out all the time. I mean, there's these RAM pods. I kept hearing them and I didn't know what the heck they were. And I don't know where people found out about them except maybe watching other ghost hunting shows. But it's an amazing gadget where you see like stick people, and it's amazing the way it works. You can see the result. So I think the media might be helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention is, doesn't Steve deal with infrasound or the study of?
Yes. Yeah, Steve's looking at infrasound in haunted locations.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's fascinating.
And I know that you're not into cryptozoology, but things like Bigfoot, apparently, I have heard Dave McCullough, he's a Bigfoot researcher, and he's really up on reading about interactions with Bigfoot, and that is a big thing. And one of the symptoms of the infrasound is making you feel a certain way, but you don't hear anything. So it's affecting you. And what I've experienced it, and I'm not sure if the source was Bigfoot, but you get this either feeling of stark fear, or you might even get nauseated. You feel that wherever you are, you want to leave. I was in the middle of the woods. Actually, there's a place to go swimming at night. There was a creek there with a sandy beach. And I'd gone there several times, and then one night, I got outside of the car, and I felt like I was being pushed to get out of that area. It scared me to death. I got in the car, and I said to my friend, "We've got to go." And he said to me, "I know, I feel it too." We couldn't get out of there fast enough. And it was the only time, and I can't help but feel, something was influencing us. And other people have mentioned the same thing. Nothing that you could hear, but you certainly could feel it. So I don't know what you can use as an instrument to measure that. Does Steve have something?
Steve is the man to go to ask all of those questions.
But does he have any gadgets like that measure the infrared?
He can measure
infrasound?
Yeah, there are tools available that will measure infrasound.
But he does have it.
Yes.
Actually, he's working on a PhD in infrasound, right?
Yeah, in haunted locations.
In haunted locations, yeah. Well, who's not to say that, I don't know, Bigfoot coming and going between dimensions, that, you know, how do you define haunted?
Exactly.
I did ask him one time about that, Bigfoot and infrasound, and
Yeah.
he just really didn't want to
Well, maybe he,
commit either way.
well,
you know.
he probably hasn't interacted or had
Oh,
enough exposure
I don't think he's studied
to
that part
those
of
who
it,
have
yeah.
had the experience. Yeah, so that does make a difference. So
Oh, yeah.
how can you commit yourself when you don't really know? That is fascinating. So I can see where the media might be helpful that way, but then the media can also give their own slant on something and emphasize something that may be helpful or not, but it may be deceptive
Yeah.
for the end result.
Yes, and certainly that, you know, I'm well aware of examples where the media can be detrimental to what we're trying to achieve.
I would think, yeah.
So it's certainly fascinating about what the media effects can be for positive and the negative.
Okay. So in your study, do you like to go on ghost investigations yourself?
Yes,
Do you do enjoy
absolutely.
that?
I do enjoy it. I enjoy it as a researcher studying, you know, reports of phenomena, but also as a researcher studying the ghost hunters themselves. So to sit
Oh.
there and watch the ghost hunters doing what they're doing, it's like people watching. It's absolutely and endlessly fascinating.
Do you feel that you learned something from their methodology? Or
I
just about
learn-
their behavior?
I learn lots about their methodology and their behaviour. And it's interesting when you're divorcing yourself from being an investigator to just sitting back and watching the dynamics between the group, the way that they behave, the words that they say, how they speak to each other, their understanding of the piece of equipment, or their understanding, or maybe even lack of, the scientific method. Lots of things are coming into play.
Okay, when you say you love to go on ghost investigations, do you go to observe, or do you sometimes go yourself to investigate?
You do participate,
I do
don't you?
participate.
Okay.
What is your approach then? when
My
you
approach,
proceed?
right. Well, my approach stems back very much to the influences that were upon me when I was a child.
Oh, sure, because you lean on your own experiences,
You
certainly.
do, yeah. So when I grew up, after those two formative experiences of having that anomalous incident and then going to see Ghostbusters, my first thing to do was to ask my mum, well, have you seen a ghost? And she told me about an experience that she had when she was about 17, 18 years old. And so then I was absolutely fascinated to find out who else has seen a ghost. And then it was, how do I find out more? Well, as growing up in the 80s, we didn't have paranormal reality television.
No.
We didn't have access to the internet. The only means of finding out information was going to that place called a library and getting a book.
And look at the books, yeah.
So I was fortunate that my dad worked in education, so we had there was a library that I could go to. So I was getting books by Peter Underwood and Andrew
Yes, me
Mackenzie.
too.
And I can remember on my 13th birthday getting The Ghost Hunter's Guide by Peter Underwood. And I'd read the book anyway because I borrowed it from the library. But to have my own copy
Oh,
as
thrilling.
on my 13th birthday was like, this is brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
So what I would do to adopt my own methodology was to emulate what the likes of Peter Underwood would say. So it was about, even then, interviewing the witness. And it was emphasized by him that, that's your most important part. It's not anything else. You need to find out what the witness has experienced, asking them questions, getting them to describe what had happened, finding out all their information, their background. And then
the mental status of
Yeah.
the witness.
And then going into looking at the history of the building or the place, looking at the geographical area, looking at the structure where the haunting is taking place, gathering as much information as possible, and then going on to an actual on-site field study and gathering all the equipment. So I can remember buying a toolbox
Really?
and loading it with all the equipment that Peter Underwood had recommended putting in there.
And he was writing, what, in the 70s, wasn't he?
70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Well, he kept going.
He
and,
started, yeah.
pretty much until his death,
70s
you know,
and 80s.
in the 2000s. You know, the man was a prolific author.
We got about 1 minute to the bottom of the hour. What equipment would that have been at that time?
There were lots of things in there to try and prevent, you know, natural causes or natural things getting in the way of the investigation. So making sure that doors and windows were sealed.
Yeah, good
one of the
idea.
great favourites was putting newspaper down, sprinkling it with sugar. So if anybody came into the room, they would stand on the sugar and you'd
Disturb
hear
it.
the crunch of the sugar.
Yeah, or like powder, and then you could see
Yes,
footprints.
exactly.
That sort of
And
thing.
one of my favourites was getting cotton thread and tying it between 2 points with and putting honey across the thread.
Honey?
And then if anybody walked through it, they wouldn't feel the cotton thread breaking. But whatever they were wearing would retain a honey mark across, so you'd know who it was
Right.
that actually broke that way. Because nowadays, we don't need that, because every ghost hunter has got infrared cameras on tripods, all
Yeah.
mounted all over the place.
Yeah.
But
Old
back
school.
then, it was the old school. Tape recorders,
Yeah, they even
actual
used tape
tapes.
recorders then.
actual tapes.
Using a compass.
Yeah, all those kinds of things.
Yep.
But most importantly, a notepad and pen,
Yeah.
Yes, and I
Writing.
take mine.
writing everything down.
It really does help.
Taking
And
notes.
kind of timing things in the location, what room you were in, what time it was.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Because if you're with a bunch of people, it helps locate everybody and
And speaking of time,
eliminates.
it's just about the bottom of
I
the
know,
hour.
another break. Got a break.
So we're just going to take a short break, and we will be back in just a couple of minutes.
Don't go anywhere.
No, don't go anywhere. That goes for you too.
Okay.
Welcome back to Edge of Reality TV with Lynn and Willie, and our special guest tonight, parapsychologist Dylan Jones,
Welcome.
has
Dylan.
come all the way over from England just to be with us here
Yes,
tonight.
yes. It was a
we-
long
we-
walk.
Yeah, it's a long walk.
But he did it
got
for
his feet
us.
wet too,
Yeah.
in a way, you know.
And my arms are still aching from all that
I can
sure it is.
imagine.
clapping.
But we're
So
very
welcome back.
grateful.
Thank you.
So moving along with our conversation regarding equipment and so forth, there are, well, some things that happen in the paranormal that, as far as I can see, simply are not measurable. Now, George, one of our members for Spirit Chasers Paranormal, he brought up the idea that he feels that sometimes some of these ghosts are shapeshifters, that they will appear to you as either you're expecting them to be, or appear to you maybe to lure you in. Like sometimes, and often demons are accused of doing this, but they may appear like as a little girl and talk to you and maintain that that personality and character until they start changing to lure you in and get you off track anyway, so you don't really know what you're dealing with. And I thought about what he was saying about one of the characters at the James house sort of shape-shifting, and I thought, nah, I don't think so. Oh, it wasn't the James house, it was the annex.
Oh,
And
the
that
annex,
we were dealing with something that we thought was perhaps an elemental, something that had never been in a body. And he was saying that it's a shapeshifter, and it assumes the demeanor of a person. So I don't think there's any way of measuring something like that. Do you think? I mean, has Steve dealt with that, with shapeshifters?
I can't answer for what Steve has dealt with. You know.
Like in passing conversation, has he mentioned something like that?
I mean, we'd obviously talk about lots of things because Steve's over here with me at the moment.
Yeah. I
oh,
should talk with him sometime.
Yeah, you definitely need to get him as a guest, definitely. What I would say from my perspective is that when I'm looking at things, you're looking at either subjective or objective experiences, and people's interpretations are subjective. as a
Yeah.
social scientist, I'm interested in getting objective data. What does the data tell me that's going on? And my data involves, listening to what people's accounts are. It's not my job to say that person's right or wrong. My job is to find out and document what that person has experienced. It's not for me to say whether it's real or not, because to them, it clearly is.
Oh, sure.
But it's very, when somebody's describing that kind of thing, is to make a full record of their subjective experience and then using a scientific method, try to establish objectively what has gone on. But as we all know, when we come to studying what people believe to be paranormal phenomena, it never happens, when you want it to.
You mean you can't press a button?
Sadly, wouldn't that be great? Just go and get the proton pack, the ghost trap, and off we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, in conclusion, like at the end of your study period here on the PhD, how is this going to benefit you? I mean, is it just going to satisfy your curiosity? Where are you going to take it?
Johnson, that is a very, very good question. And I think it comes down largely to the fact of why am I doing the PhD? And that is because of a personal experience growing up to answer some questions. I'm not going to get the answer to the question of what I actually saw when I was 7 years old, but it's about getting a greater understanding of human behavior, of understanding of human experience, what it means. There's the personal satisfaction of, taking on a project like this over 6 years, producing a 100,000-word thesis, and then getting your doctorate out of it. So I get obviously you're in the title Dr. Dylan Jones. And there's no guarantee that will happen. I've actually got to finish this first and complete it.
Just one minor little thing.
Yeah, but that end goal. But it's where that takes me then, and it's very much something I'm thinking about at the moment. Is what do I want post PhD, and what I want, I believe what I want is to do more research. At the investigation of hauntings and ghosts, but also continue looking at people's experiences and understanding more about it. I was talking to Willie earlier on that I've already started to engage in certain things that I want to do post-PhD, so writing books.
Maybe even lecturing, I would think.
And lecturing is another thing.
From what you've done.
And I've actually started, I'm working with a colleague of mine writing a book. We've started on that. Also helping out doing certain educational things down in Savannah in Georgia, looking at investigating things down there, and that kind of thing. So there are other things that I'm going to do. So it's quite exciting. It's an exciting time for me at the moment.
Well, here's the conundrum. Like, unless you make an effort to expand your psychic awareness, you may continue to look at your data the same way. That if you were to increase your understanding psychically or spiritually, you may wind up putting the pieces together yourself. And an example of the point I'm trying to make is seeing something and then not knowing if it was a ghost or if it was just a dream. I think you gain clarification through time, because I did have one hypnagogic dream like that. I was having a dream and I was wound up being half awake and I could not break the dream. So I knew that I was in between states. It was scary. It lasted about a full minute. I could see my bedroom, but the elements of the dream were like overlaid in the bedroom. And I couldn't break it. And then in about a minute's time, it dissipated so that the bedroom became the main focus, and I was entirely awake then. So I knew that dream for what it was, but I have felt other things in different altered states where I knew I was in an altered state once upon awakening. A good example of that is I had a dream that I was rising up and I went right past the roof of my bedroom, and I drifted off to the left, and I couldn't move. I was like paralyzed, and all I could do was look over like this into the light socket that was in the ceiling. And I saw two white cords coming together like this, and they were held together with an end cap. Well, I wondered for a long time, was that a dream or not? 3 different light fixtures in my house I replaced. The last one was the one in the bedroom. When I pulled it down, it was the only one that had 2 thick white electrical cords coming together. It was that the base of the fixture was right up against the ceiling, so when I passed through the ceiling, I saw the 2 main cords. So that was something that alerted me to the fact that a dream like that is in some sense another reality, or an expanded reality, or an alternate reality. So I think that you might become more and more aware of, if you do see something and it looks like your uncle, it could very well be your uncle, that there's a higher likelihood that it's your uncle than a hypnagogic dream. So I think after you gather that evidence, and from your own experience, you start seeing what the data is indicating. I don't think you can just look at it at face value. And I think it just takes a little time to start expanding your awareness. And usually it's just through experience. So I think that might be helpful, because you just can't look at data, you know?
It's
I mean,
interesting.
bottom line, at the end of your study, it's just not all data.
Yeah.
There's the human element.
Yeah, I mean, there is a human element to it. But as a researcher, in a professional capacity,
Oh,
and we come back to
yes.
what professionalism is, I have to be able to step back from the subjective and look at objectively, how do I present that to a wider group of people, that I can say that, you know, by looking at A and B, what does that equal? That I've got a progression of evidence that I can show.
That you can draw a soft conclusion.
Yeah.
But I don't think we'll ever have hard evidence on something like this.
Who knows?
Do you?
Who knows? That's, you know, we're striving all the time with good scientific methodology, gathering sound data, and being able to present it to people with the conclusions.
I think we need to develop new laws of physics, an additional law of physics under other circumstances and conditions that apply to what we're experiencing. I think it's out there. I think it's all scientific. It's just we haven't figured out how to, we see how it manifests, but we don't know how to define it.
I think we'll always have questions, and we should always be looking for the answers
I agree.
with an open mind.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a fascinating topic. Well, please tell us, how about Savannah? I'd like to know about those ghost tours and how you got involved with that, because it's over here in the States.
Yeah.
So
That was after I'd actually been on been to see you at the Para Expo at the end of May, and observing the groups in this area. I went down to do the same thing in Savannah and started working with a lovely group down there.
yeah, beautiful weather too, I would imagine.
And I was introduced to somebody down there. Her name's Bridget. She runs one of the ghost tour companies in Savannah. And you know, we hit it off. We realised that we've both got the same interest in what we do. She's very much from a spiritual perspective, and I'm very much from the scientific perspective. So we were on the ghost tours, and we got talking that, you know, we both had things that we would like to do in a professional capacity, like writing books, from both the scientific perspective, but also the historical perspective.
Important,
Yeah.
yes.
So having been to Savannah, I absolutely fell in love with the city.
Oh, I bet you did. It's really just, it's enchanting.
Oh, I don't know if you ever read the book Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
I saw the movie.
You've seen the movie as well, yeah. The author describes Savannah as beguiling.
Yeah.
When you walk around those cobbled streets, when you see the trees and the Spanish moss hanging from them, you look at the architecture, and you become aware of the history of Savannah as a city, you cannot fail to fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And it also has
Romantic.
the advantage of being allegedly the most haunted city in America.
You think so?
Well, that's what they claim.
That's what they
Allegedly.
say.
That's what they say. So, you know, when I was working with Bridget, we really hit it off, and what we wanted to do was work together on some projects. So we've we're quite a way into writing the first book together, which
Oh,
is
wonderful.
on the ghosts and hauntings of Savannah. Now, there are quite a
Oh,
number
what's
of...
her name?
Bridget Pitts.
Pitts?
Yeah, so Bridget
Okay.
runs the ghost tour company there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the name of the company or not.
I believe so.
Oh,
Okay, well, she runs the Witching Hour.
oh, cute. That's right. I saw that on your site.
So that's she's a successful ghost tour that runs there. And what we started doing was when I went over in July, I went along on the tour, and she was delivering it from the spiritual aspect, but I was there as a parapsychologist. And what we found was that members of the public who were on the tour were getting two different perspectives on a ghost tour. One was the spiritual side of things, the ghosts being seen and that kind of thing, and the equipment. And then I was there where I could give, well, there is another perspective to this from the scientific aspect. So there were actually, both elements were being addressed on the tour, and it really caught on. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is a number of tours down in Savannah where members of the public can go along and they can get both aspects.
Was she covering the historical aspects as
Yes.
well? So the spiritual and the
Yes,
historical?
yeah. I mean,
and you did the scientific pretty much.
I don't want to be biased, but she's one of the best ghost tour guides I've seen.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
absolutely fantastic. It is
That's
a really
nice.
good tour. Run every night of the week, and it's well worth going on.
So I don't imagine she draws conclusions or hard conclusions as to who these ghosts are, but she gives you an idea of like who lived there and what happened and it could possibly be so-and-so.
Yeah, I mean, she's got very much her perception on what the ghosts are and who they are.
That's that's great.
And there are so many accounts of people who are born and bred in Savannah or who have visited and worked there as to who these ghosts are.
Yeah. Well, people get psychic impressions too that they can add
Exactly,
to it
yeah.
that enhances.
And she has had some of her own,
Wow.
which is fascinating. I look at it as a scientist, so I'm interested in the experiences, but from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So we've got that nice balance, and as a result, we're doing more of these tours. So it's something that we hope to progress in the future.
Since you saw your uncle, have you had repeated paranormal experiences?
I've had experiences which I would say are interesting and anomalous.
Okay.
Whether they're paranormal or not, I don't know.
Well, if they're anomalous, they probably are. Unless they're light anomalies, but I mean...
I haven't seen anything. That's the only experience I've had
Okay.
of actually seeing something was that particular one when I was 7.
Okay.
The others have been auditory phenomena. So,
Auditory?
Yeah, so hearing things that have gone
okay.
on. Now, auditory or audible phenomena are quite difficult to pin down where the
It is
sounds
because you don't
are
always
coming
know.
from.
Yeah.
That's why I say I could say they were
The
anomalous.
source.
I can't say whether they were paranormal because you couldn't determine the actual source.
Mm-hmm.
The one experience that I had that I remember quite vividly was when I was about 19, 20 years old. We were investigating a property in the South Wales valleys where I was living and working at the time.
The what valleys?
The South Wales valleys, because I'm
Oh,
from Wales.
Wales, okay,
In
yeah.
South Wales,
South Wales.
there are a lot of geographically there are several valleys which were carved out in the Ice Age all that time ago, and
Yeah, so what did you sense?
and the house that we were investigating is a very old manor house called Llancaich Fawr Manor, which was built in the early 1600s. It featured prominently in the English Civil War, and there are lots of ghost stories associated with the manor house. Several ghosts sighted there, lots of people having unusual experiences, and we were there overnight when we heard what sounded like children's voices and children laughing upstairs in the property. The only other thing that happened at the same time was, people often report a tangible change in the atmosphere of a place, of a feeling, a sort of a sensation that is an electric atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's a subjective experience. You can't quantify it.
No.
You can't objectively measure it. But it was one of those moments where we could look at each other and, oh oh, what's this? A strange feeling. And then these sounds were heard. Now we don't know what the cause of those sounds were. I'm open-minded as to what they are. But that was the only other anomalous experience really that I can draw to. I've spoken to countless people who have reported things. I've spoken to several police officers who, were in work where they claimed to have seen or heard unusual things that they believed were paranormal. And over the years, I've spoken to countless members of the public who've reported unusual things.
I think the police officers are really fascinating because of the way they're taught to be observant.
Yeah, I mean, it's no guarantee that you'll observe everything correctly.
No.
But, they're trained in observing.
Yeah, they're trained in observing.
They can make mistakes. Everybody's human, everybody's fallible, and memory can be a weird and wonderful thing. People do misinterpret things.
Yeah, I think it's great to write things down as soon as you possibly can.
And one thing I learned as a police officer when taking witness statements is how people can mistake what they've seen and be absolutely adamant. I can remember a number of occasions where you would be speaking to somebody and they'd say, no, I'm absolutely 100% certain this is what happened, this is how I saw it, that's what it is. You review CCTV footage,
it says something different.
and it's different.
Yeah.
Yet the witness is adamant. They believe that they were correct. They weren't lying.
No.
But it's amazing what the human memory can be like.
Yeah. Another thing that Willie and I have experienced, oddly enough, are smells.
Yeah, olfactory phenomena,
Yes,
unusual
twice that has
smells.
happened. And how do you measure that? Except that we smelled eucalyptus at the same time.
Yes.
I think I forgot to tell you, but I had another experience with that just recently at the
With
house.
the eucalyptus at the James
Yeah,
house?
yeah.
Wow. And eucalyptus, of course, was used as a decongestant in the 1700s. It used to be peppermint, and it came from England, the peppermint therapeutics. And it got changed. I can't remember why, but it was sometime in the 1700s. They started using eucalyptus. And at the James house, several family members had died of TB consumption. And I'm sure they used eucalyptus then, so it made perfect sense as to why we were smelling it. It was pretty fleeting. It didn't last a full minute, but we smelled it at the same time. And there was another place, it was a fog museum. It was an old colonial house, and we walked into what used to be the kitchen, and we were faced with the stench of like rotting shrimp. And there were several of us that smelled it, only the smell, the odor moved with us. That was odd.
Yeah.
From one room to another, and then it eventually faded. But there were, 4 or 5 people that smelled it. You, me, Val, her friend, and then Andy Kit. 5 of us smelled that same horrible rotting odor.
And that's the thing, is it's these unusual experiences. We don't know when they're going to happen.
No,
As you say,
can't measure it.
you can't objectively quantify.
Nope.
So you're relying then on putting your subjective experiences down on paper, your date, your time, your location, giving as much experience as you can, all of you doing that, making a written record. And then gradually over time, you're building up this picture of what's going on. And then you may start to find patterns emerging in dates and times and location. And that's why it's important to keep written records. One of those things that Peter Underwood was, back in his books,
Absolutely right.
advocating to do.
Yeah, I just think that's so important to carry pen and paper with you when you're doing an investigation and try to keep track of the time.
Or even a smartphone. That's the advantage of having one. You can put it all in your notes. Type it in there and
That's
then,
true
and you've
too,
got it.
yeah.
So some people don't have phones.
That's true.
Who are you talking about?
And
Okay.
they're also good in the dark as well, because you don't have to worry about carrying a torch and trying to write.
Yeah, that's true, because the
That's what I
screen
was thinking.
lights
How
up.
do you see what you're writing in the dark?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you just offhandedly, have you ever been to Port Isaac in Wales?
No.
Or in Cornwall? No? How about, have you been up to Hadrian's Wall?
I've driven through the gap in the wall.
Have you?
It would have gone to Scotland, but I've never actually walked across Hadrian's Wall.
Oh.
It's weird, isn't it? When you live somewhere,
I know, yeah.
you never go to those places, on your doorstep, as it were. You will travel many miles, like to New England, to go and see things.
That's so true. But what fascinates me about Hadrian's Wall is they've cited, Roman soldiers walking around there, and I would love to experience something like
Well,
that.
it's funny you should mention the Roman soldiers. Where I grew up in South Wales, that was one of the places where the Romans actually settled. So we have literally 4 miles from where I grew up, is a little village called Caerleon. There is a Roman amphitheatre there. There's the Roman barracks. There's all those things there, and there are lots and lots of reports of people sighting Roman soldiers in that area, hearing marching footsteps.
Newport?
Just outside of Newport in South Wales, this little village called Caerleon. If you look on the Great British Ghost Tour,
I will.
it's on there. Caerleon.
Caerleon.
Caerleon. So it's Caerleon. Caerleon.
Thank you. I will do that.
So it's on there.
Fascinating. Oh my goodness. So your book. What can you tell us about that? Do you have a title yet, a working title?
We're working. It's on the Ghosts and Hauntings in Savannah. We haven't settled on the title yet.
Okay.
But we're pulling together lots of different accounts, because there are a lot of published accounts and books on the ghosts of Savannah and that part of Georgia.
A lot of ground to cover, and then how do you
so
organize
we're
it?
drawing all those together at the moment. Then we're going to be going to these different places. We're going to be speaking to the witnesses. We're asking for more people
So
who've
you're
had
coming back
experiences.
again?
Yeah, back and forth quite a lot.
That's
So we're
fabulous.
building this up, and hopefully then moving on to other areas in the United States and the UK, because that's what we would both like to do.
Yeah. If you get a chance, you know, America's Stonehenge is just a fascinating site, megalithic. A lot of things have taken place there over eons, thousands of years.
Yeah.
So if that's highly active, you might want to just visit there too. I'm sure you've got a lot of methods.
And the good thing is, you know, the two of us working together, there's an interesting dynamic, because we've got somebody's on the spiritual side, me on the scientific side, one American, one Brit, one male, one female,
That's great.
coming together, working together, different perspectives, and
Pull your
hoping it provides
resources.
a nice contrast to each other and a nice little angle.
And complementary too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how much longer do you have in your PhD? 3 more years?
I've got another 3 years to go.
3.
So I'm just coming up to the halfway point. So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
So you wind up, like at the end of the day, or even at the end of a moment, you wind up writing up everything that you've just experienced. That's excellent.
Yeah, a lot of it is typing up notes.
That's time consuming. But if you
yeah.
do it right on the spot, that's really time saving.
Yeah, that's the key to it. And then what probably a lot of people don't realise is that when you gather all that data, you then put it into a computer program called NVivo, and then you start looking for, you code everything that you've got. So you're looking like, you could literally type in, search the word professional, and it'll pull up all the times that the word professional has been mentioned. So you can start to make links between all these different things.
Wonderful,
so you're getting,
yeah.
so all the data
Helps you
starts to come
organize
together.
it.
That's where the analysis in the last 2 years really happens. Lots of work to be done.
Okay, we're almost down to the end here. We've got about 2 minutes.
Well, let me just see how
Let's
else
see.
can I
Some
pick his
final
brain?
thoughts.
Well, do you have a final thought?
No, I didn't know if you had one. Well, Dylan, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Firstly, a huge thank you for having me on the show tonight.
It's a
an
pleasure.
It's been a privilege and an honour. All I would say is that over the last couple of years, I think it's wonderful that people go out there with, you know, a passion to investigate the paranormal, and long may that continue. And hopefully that the research that I pull together will help build a resource that can look at the ways that people investigate. But what I would say to people is, you know, one thing that they really need to do is go back to the old-fashioned ways, shall we say, picking up a book, read what people have done before. Because what comes across quite often is the modern ghost hunter is not aware of the history of ghost hunting and what's come before. I was at a talk the other day. I put a picture up on the PowerPoint and asked, "Who's this man?" Nobody knew. And it was Harry Price, who investigated Borley
really?
Rectory.
Yeah.
Nobody knew him. The next picture I put up was the host of Ghost Adventures, and yet everybody knew him.
Well, that's
Sad,
what
huh?
part the media plays, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. However, I think it's important too to read other people's experiences. Then you'll realize, number one, you're not alone. Number two, there are a lot of similarities, which just increase the likelihood that what you experienced has some sort of validity or substance to it. And that, I think, is very important. Otherwise, why bother ghost hunting if you don't gain an understanding from it? And think about, we're becoming an intergalactic community. You know, we're going to soon be connecting with people beyond the Earth's realm, you know? And to me, that's just, we're increasing the scope of our knowledge. Ghosts, ETs, it's all beyond the 3D world, right?
Maybe.
All
Well,
right.
possibly.
We have to wrap it up there. Dylan,
All right.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both.
It's been very interesting, informative. And that is Edge of Reality TV.
Thank you for all your info. Wonderful having you on.
Thank you.
And good night, everybody.
Good night.